So what are your views on this? 16, 18, he says 16 first of all. And then he says the law is good, we need it at 16. So what do you feel about this, sir?
Kabir, you were one of our ambassadors for Childline. Yes, how could you say that?
That's because I'm an ambassador for Childline that I say that.
Well, you know,
there are differentiation between children beneath 16 and those above.
There are really two aspects to this. One is the legal aspect, which defines their legal liabilities, their responsibilities. The other is the social aspect. For a minute before talking about the legal aspect, I will dwell on the social aspect. In India, even to this day and age, even in the modern India that we are in now, is it all right if an 18-year-old comes home and tells his parents, I turned 18 yesterday and this is the woman I have married? Is it all right for parents? Would parents accept the boy's judgment of his decision to marry? Indian families across the country, no matter which religion, which community, which caste they belong to, tend to be very closed and protective of their children. Children are not allowed to make independent decisions even at age 25. It's very rare for that to happen. When that happens, you have a rebellion typically. So this is the norm in society as far as India is concerned. Now let's look at the legal aspects. The Representation of People's Act says you can vote at 18. The Indian Majority Act says you're a minor until the age of 18. You cannot sign a document, you cannot sign a passport application, you cannot sign a college admission application, you cannot sign any legal document or even engage a lawyer until the age of 18. The Guardian and Wards Act says that you are a minor until the age of 18 and you need a guardian to sign any document or even for inheriting property. The Factories Act, the Juvenile Justice Act, many of these acts in Bombay, the Maharashtra government tells us that you may be able to vote for the Prime Minister at 18. But hey, if you want a glass of beer, you need to be 25. The Maharashtra government tells us you don't have the ability to judge whether a glass of beer is good or bad for you until the age of 25. So therefore, how come we suddenly come at this unique age of 16? Prevented us from picking 15 or 17? What is the basis for 16? Is there any statistics that shows that at 16 something changes? What actually happens at 16? You have 10 years of education, you have just passed the 10th standard at age 16. And it is our case that these 10th standard pass students know the ability to judge their behavior and the risks that their action might result in. In fact, when the Justice Verma Committee was set up post the Delhi gang rape, we all made submissions. The Justice Verma Committee extensively went into this question of whether juveniles below 18 who commit a heinous crime should be treated as adults. He noted, in fact, the learned judge noted that worldwide research shows that part of the brain which helps a person evaluate the risk of any action starts developing at 18 and matures at 25. Now when we talk about punishment, Kabir Bedi has correctly said that any punishment should have a deterrence value. However, deterrence is 1/3 of a punishment. The other two are retribution and reformation. And I'm afraid every time we say hang this man, kill that man, shoot this man, we are really allowing the retribution component to take over completely and ignoring the fact that there is a reformation component that has to be built in. If an adult tomorrow, a 30-year-old says in front of a judge in the adult court that look here, I may be 30 years old, but my judgment and my thinking is that of a 15-year-old. So therefore I should not be tried as an adult. Would you accept it? Would that be acceptable to us? Is it acceptable to us that a case in an adult court can go for 10 years and then it might result in a life imprisonment which will effectively prevent any juvenile from ever reforming and ever becoming a normal citizen? If we simply hang every juvenile...
Many of the things that you say are correct. That doesn't change my basic argument. Because what we're talking about here is the Juvenile Justice Act. And part of the act is that any juvenile will first be referred to the juvenile board for evaluation as to whether this teenager, 16-year-old, has the capacity to understand the consequences of his crime or not before he is prosecuted. And therefore that mechanism of safety has been inserted deliberately so that there are no miscarriages of justice in terms of who is tried and who is punished. I just want to make that clear because the Juvenile Justice Board is the intermediary in deciding whether this person has the judgment of an adult or not. And I submit that today's 16-year-olds are far wiser, far smarter, far more informed than the 20-year-olds of 20 years ago.
I'm going to be taking an in-between view of this. I think you brought in some valid
yes or a no.
points.
You can't be middle.
No grey areas for today.
Maybe. I do believe that at the moment, India is a very large country with many different kinds of people in many different kinds of social strata. So I don't think that one rule which we can apply to even a city like a Delhi or a Bombay, there's been rural India. So if we apply a rule of 16 versus 18, this is for the entire country. You know, we don't have laws which are state-wise or region-wise. And so I do think taking the diversity of this country, taking the fact that, you know, we really are changing at a very, very fast pace. Our society is changing really literally at cyber speed. The kind of things that happen today with technology, with mobile phones, with the internet, with infrastructure, with road connectivity, planes, trains, whatever, is really in some way, as you said correctly, that kids today are far wiser and far less protected than they were 20 years ago, and far more informed. So I do think that what we need in place is a case-by-case basis. Now, looking on the other hand, look at the Nirbhaya case. It was that juvenile who performed the most heinous of the crimes, if you look very closely at that rape. So does that young man deserve to be punished? Yes. And on that point, if you look at the juvenile centers that we have, the reform centers that we have, they're in awful condition. So if we do take a 16-year-old, do we really feel like he's going to get reformed? If he does get a 2-year sentence at a juvenile center, do we really feel like he's going to come out not being a criminal? And that young man will then end up being a menace to society for many years of his life. So I do think that what we perhaps need is a middle approach where there is a committee where people can decide whether this particular individual and the extent of the crime is committed can be either can be treated as an adult or a juvenile.
That's what the Juvenile Justice Board does before it hands over a 16-year-old to the process of law. That's the purpose of the Juvenile Justice Board, which is part of the Act. And therefore I support the Act.
Exactly. So I do think that if we can take an approach where, yes, at 16 there's no way that you can go to jail, that should be removed, but then there's something to say that maybe it could be a slightly more lenient punishment at 16 to 18. So I do think that we have to leave this up to our judicial system.
I'm sure the judges will consider that.
Exactly.
Okay, so this side of the bench is becoming pro, and we have Sir there with his views. But Abhay, you would like to come in and share something from your side?
It is becoming actually one side versus the other.
Good debate.
Yeah, I have an issue with it because one, I think it's a shortcut. The problem is that rule of law doesn't exist. I mean, what makes you think that adults who anyways today, if they committed something like a rape, are going to get the severest punishment? Yet adults keep committing those. So what guarantees that a 16 and 17-year-old is going to listen now that the law has come down? They get the same punishment as a 32-year-old. The 32-year-old doesn't care about it. Why would the 16-year-old care? That's my one problem with it.
Okay, so if someone wants to commit a crime, he or she is going to commit a crime.
The rule of law needs to exist. If there's a rule of law, why do we pay our taxes? Because we know we'll fall into trouble tomorrow if we don't. Because they are effective about making sure that we do. So if they're making sure and effective that anybody who commits a crime, rape for example, will get punished, it'll be expedited, it'll go through the courts really fast, they won't commit that crime. You don't need to change the law, you need to implement the law. And I think it's a shortcut because what's dangerous is they might then what they need to do is train the police, sensitize them. They have so much work to do. The guy in the Nirbhaya case was, as a 10-year-old staying on the streets. There are a lot of kids like that out there. There are more rapists to come because the system has failed them. So I'm saying that reducing this law, let's not forget that there's a lot of reform, a lot of education that needs to be done and the groundwork and infrastructure needs to be done. Otherwise, they're going to sit back and say, "Ab to humne law change kar diya," now they'll get scared. They're not going to get scared. It's not going to take care of the rapes. I don't know.
I think a lot of people will be deterred once they realize the consequence of this. I mean, like that case on Gumrah where this boy uploaded a video of him and his girlfriend and ended up ruining the lives of the girl, himself, his family, his brothers, sisters, her family, etc. So people just think it's fun, it's okay. If you realize that, listen, this is a crime, and if you do that crime, you're going to suffer severe penalties, not just legally but socially, and there are huge consequences to this. People will stop and think 10 times before texting an SMS like that. Not that it doesn't happen, but the thing is, once people are aware of the severity of consequences, I'm sure a lot who might have done it won't do it, and there's no way of measuring that except common sense.
No, sir, but then why are there so many rapes still going on in our country?
You can't prevent rape, you can't prevent crime. It's a question of how much
You
you
could,
diminish it.
Okay, I need
and
to
how
come
you
in
punish
here.
it.
One is looking at the micro picture, one is looking at the macro picture. So it's a question of the bigger one. He kept raising his hand and he was like, okay, I'm listening to this. So I'll have to come in between both of you. This discussion will go on otherwise. But sir, 16 years old, 17 years old in recent cases have been involved in crimes that were unheard of in our country from a long time. So do you think that the way you are looking at the situation where you say, no, a child is yet a child?
By case. So that one case could be
Exactly. I do
specially
think
done.
that it
Yeah.
needs to be case by case and also adult.
But I understand the Juvenile Act is going to be a blanket, okay, 16 is an adult. That's how I understand it, right?
No, there's
It's
no
not
really
allowing
right.
space
It will go to
for...
Juvenile
There is,
Justice
there
Board.
is,
The
It
yeah.
juvenile
will first go to the board.
Yes.
It goes first to the board,
Board.
and the board decides whether the child, this 16-year-old has the capacity to understand the consequence of his actions, what was its intent, what are the circumstances, and in those circumstances recommends whether it should be tried as an adult or not.
But what happens in a case when, let's say, a 15-year-old girl and a 16-year-old boy are boyfriend and girlfriend and they decide to have sex, and then the father gets angry and then puts him up for rape, then what happens?
If you're 16, you should
girl is
know...
15.
No, you see, misuse
That's
of...
the age when you
Wait. Misuse of the law is one thing. I mean, there are a lot of women claiming rape after having a relation under the new law. This is the same penalty that any 18-year-old faces. So, I'm saying there's no difference today between the 16 and 18-year-olds,
Or maybe
given the way
But maybe
society
the board
has changed.
suggests, sorry, or maybe the board says that these two are...
The thing is that just by changing this law, aren't they going to then be lax about sensitizing the police, training the police, perhaps getting some infrastructure in place? Because I think that's where the real work...
That's a very important point that you
That's-
raised earlier also, and there's another point that you raised just before that.
People aren't more vocal about reform and infrastructure as opposed to the law. For me, really, I keep saying, I think the law is a shortcut. It's an excuse not to,
No, I
not to
it is a shortcut,
implement
but
an
in that
infrastructure.
period,
But then-
you know,
Then to add flame to the fire, what would you tell a person?
A middle ground, like as they were mentioning, if they can take specific cases and treat them separately because of the nature of the crime, and I think you also in agreement with that. I think all of us are in agreement of,
But not treat them as adults.
but not treat them as adults. No, that I'm not for.
So,
Because I think that, like I said, this boy who was in the Nirbhaya case, who was raped and grew up on the streets, you think there aren't 30, 40, 50, 60,000 more of him right now? You don't have to be in a jail to be raped and be hardened. Life will do that to you. Just because we have kids on the streets right now, and these could be possibly your future rapists. I'm not saying rape doesn't happen within higher societies, it does, and that's a different set of crime altogether. It's a different group of people altogether. So you've got to take it each and
Yes,
compartmentalize it.
But
And
you
one of the problems is that, they grow up in such environments that they get hardened by the time they're 16,
but
17.
unfortunately, law is universal, and we cannot compartmentalize
Yeah, I'm not
law.
saying that. I'm
That's
saying
why
I'm saying there are various things, but I'm saying that one of the issues we do have is poverty. It's a breeding ground for all sorts of criminals. Why are we not addressing that? Because everything is connected at the end of the day. Just by saying okay, lower it from 18 to 16 isn't going to make it go away. That's my issue. My issue is that might be an excuse to not take care of everything else. That makes it
Poverty
criminal.
away. I mean,
It all boils down to rule of law. If it is implemented, even the adults will be too scared to commit those crimes, yeah? But it's not. We're not supported by rule of law. So then what's going to stop the young 16-year-old from being scared? Why would he be when we don't take our judicial system seriously, when cases can go on for 10, 20 years, when corruption is an all-time high? What's going to stop them? Just a little change in the law. But the law can be abused all the time, in colleges. Would that come under the purview?
No, it's not been included in the juvenile justice. The
not been
amended. No, it's
included.
been Maneka Gandhi tried including it, but it failed to find a mark in the amended juvenile justice.
For it as such, it's very messy, and that's one of my points that I would say too. Is like, how come that's not underneath it?
Yeah, so let's keep the questions to today's...
यही बात कर रहा हूँ. मैं क्या कह रहा हूँ? मैं कह रहा हूँ कि ये हादसा अभी हुआ है, कल कोई और करेगा, कोई और उसकी जगह ले लेगा. तो प्रॉब्लम सिर्फ एक जन की नहीं है, सिर्फ यही नहीं है कि अच्छा एक ही ये बंदा है इतना बुरा है अभी इसको पनिश करो. मैं भी चाहता हूँ कि उसको पनिशमेंट मिले और एक सिवियर पनिशमेंट मिले, लाइट नहीं. एंड फॉर दैट आई एम फॉर इट. लाइक अच्छा ठीक है, यू हैव टू टेक इट केस बाय केस. अगर कुछ ज्यादा ही हीनस क्राइम है, प्लीज उसका पनिशमेंट भी उतनी ही होनी चाहिए. बट यू कांट ट्रीट हिम एज एन एडल्ट. और कहाँ पे अपना सिस्टम कहाँ पे फेल हुआ इस लड़की को लेकर. जैसे हमने कहा कि अभी आज ये है, कल कोई और होगा. अगर आप सड़क पे आपका पूरा काम सड़क पे है, you're poor, you are being raped also as a 12-year-old, right to education कहाँ गया हमारा? Where is that? So I'm saying अगर हम वो सब aspects को ना देंगे तो हम मास पर ही effect आएगा ना. After all, we are the society. We make individuals within our society. So keeping that in mind, I'm saying what I'm saying, and not to take that away. No. There's a lot of work to be done. Let's not forget that by just changing a law and then only depending on the law. Because just the law itself is not going to take these criminals away. You have to get into the society, you have to get into the psyche of the people, and you have to address some very major issues. It's going to take a lot of work. Just changing a law is not going to make any changes. Like I said, adults को severe punish मिलती है ना, क्या वो रुके इसको करने में? नहीं. तो आपको क्या लगता है 16 साल वाला कैसे रुकेगा? I mean, right sir? Day is to reform the person, so they go back into society reformed. And that's the whole idea of punishment. So you have to give them something that will not just punish them, but also make them better people. Putting them in a jail and with other hardened criminals isn't going to make them any better.